The Final Fantasy VII Remake game is amazing as for what it is, and the fact that Tabata and most of the other guys who are doing it because they're getting too old, really amazing. And they've done really good work of them coming out and saying that this is straight up just a sequel, which I do commend. But in that same breath, though, it's we now have to ask the question of what's gonna happen next, especially since that when you think about it, when we think about the Forever Crisis and the first Soul Soldier like titles that were just, you know, like just taken out there and like they've been copyrighted so that they can use them for whatever like that they're planning on doing like in the future. Something interesting just comes from it, because now you have to ask the question in terms of what's going to happen with these two brand new titles, because one of them alludes to Zack and the other one alludes to Sephiroth. Now, I don't know how people really feel about Ever Crisis, but the whole idea behind, hey man, Zack is now going to be alive. Zack is going to be walking around. Zack was already prominent as being a protagonist, or if anything being like the main character of the Final Fantasy series, because regardless of how anyone feels about it, Final Fantasy VII, or at least a good 2/3 of that, Cloud's actions and how he portrayed himself was based off of how Zack kind of portrayed himself in Crisis Core. So it's kind of it's one of those things to where that it's like, okay, now there's a timeline where Zack is alive and he's doing something in Midgar, but it feels as though is that if we take that whole thing of him kind of being the main one to go on the bombing mission, of him going through these things and what Cloud is doing in Midgar, and what if Zack met up with Aerith again, or what if Tifa met a Mako Poison Cloud early on and then got him to go back to who he was. Because again, regardless of what I mean, like, because the more that I think about that, I'm like, well, I'm interested to see that side of what's gonna happen like in the story, because that's the Ever Crisis side. On the flip side of that, we also have the First Soldier. Now it's aside from how it kind of goes down, you know what I'm saying, regardless of how you feel about Genesis, regardless of how you feel about Angel, regardless of how you feel about that quirky story that was present in Crisis Core, I do believe that the first soldier in Final Fantasy was actually Sephiroth. And with him being the first soldier, you can kind of understand, it's like, okay, if he is, then what would this story entail if we're going to kind of follow in the footsteps of Sephiroth? Because again, just based on the titles alone, it feels as though is that they can't go anywhere else with these, like, with where they're blatantly going with these two games. Now, if anything, the First Soldier may actually be a working title for the second game, because if you really think about it, right after they leave Midgar in Final Fantasy VII, the next thing they do is go, I forget the name of that city. That town. I think it's called Kime or whatever. But like the next town you go over to, it jumps straight into a flashback of when Cloud first met Sephiroth, or their mission like leading into Nibelheim. So the interesting thing is that if this is something like that's going on with that, this is a perfectly good time to kind of say, okay, Cloud, this is what you know about Sephiroth, and then you get the full story of Sephiroth, but it's kind of changed now, because now Aerith has access to the monostream, the live stream, sorry. She has access to the live stream, and because it's giving her answers now, but I feel like it's a little different now since that they got rid of the plot ghosts and everything. So she does have access to the history. to where that you could probably use that as a proxy to tell Sephiroth's story, or Sephiroth can possibly affect, because Sephiroth has been doing this in the first game, to where that he's been affecting Cloud's mind, and could possibly be using him to tell his story or show his story through Cloud and the rest of the rest of the party. Because again, remember the whole 7 seconds thing of him trying to convert Cloud over to his side. So this could be a good opportunity to kind of push that narrative. So they can do that. But going over back into the Ever Crisis thing, I feel as though is that these two stories, no matter how it plays out, the whole thing could possibly be to just converge them over, and possibly have Zack come over to the main timeline, to where that almost like he never died, and Cloud has his Buster Sword and Zack has his Buster Sword, and then they team up to fight Sephiroth or possibly fix everything. Now, I do believe that they won't ever use Genesis again, even though they did kind of hint at him being like in the next Final Fantasy game, because when you beat Dirge Cerberus and you get like this secret ending and whatnot, where basically Genesis comes and takes the final boss and is like, yeah, like we got to go do something, and he has his one wing and flies off. Now, I don't think Genesis will ever pop up in Final Fantasy again, but then again, I could be wrong, because, you know, Gak is just that dang popular, even with all the copyright and everything. But, you know, he just might pop up again. But, you know, I mean, that, and also, let's be fair here, in terms of the first soldier like prediction, I mean, Sephiroth's story is actually in the original Final Fantasy VII. However, it took a while for it to keep to kind of get going. And besides, I feel like that Sephiroth story, which if I remember, his story, you don't really learn it until like disc 3. Well, no, wait, not disc 3. Like late in the disc 2 of Final Fantasy VII, or I think it was pretty early on, like right after Aerith passes. You kind of learn like what they were doing, like with the Genova cells and everything. So that was kind of a thing. But again, you know, Angeal, Genesis, all that stuff in terms of Crisis Core, we may visit it again like with the first soldier, but let's be real, it really doesn't mean much. And in the Ever Crisis thing, I feel as though that might just turn like into like a big story with Zack, because again, Zack doesn't have teammates. Zack is capable enough to do things on his own, or better yet, he went through the soldier program, so he never had any teammates. Like, it was just, I'm strong enough to do this on my own, and he just went solo. And it seems though that might be where they're going at with the whole thing with him. Or better yet, they could actually do something with Zack in there, like in his game, to actually explain what they were talking about in Final Fantasy VII Remake. You know what I'm saying? Where like that they were like, soldiers kind of give up something to be normal. I mean, like, they can't have normal lives, that they have to give up something. And it's very interesting how like that really the only character who kind of preludes anything to that is Roche, the guy like who's on the motorcycle and everything. And it's like, well, aside from him being crazy and kind of an oddball, really we know nothing about him other than he's also somebody who's from the soldier program. That's really about it. Other than that, hard to say. But I feel as though that they could probably put a little bit more into that with Zack, because as far as I know, aside from the crazy headaches, Cloud seems like a normal person, and so does Zack. Or at least Zack seemed like a normal person, whereas Angeal, well, really, even in Crisis Core, the only first class soldiers in which that we even ran into, because I can't really say that there was a problem present in Crisis Core aside from, you know, like the Genesis cell thing and, you know, like the Angeal cells and whatnot. But those were because they were like super soldier experiments. You know what I mean? So I can't really say that they lost anything, because Angeal and Genesis, that they seem pretty normal. But as far as what I do know, I can't wait for Final Fantasy VII. Tell me what do you think about this in the comment section. I'm out.